Hello, and welcome to the inaugural edition of SSQ Issues and Answers. This program seeks to explore and analyze current national security issues. Today, the issue is North Korea's nuclear weapons. The answers will come from a distinguished panel of faculty members at the Air University. With me today is Dr. Xiaoming Zhang, Professor of Strategy at the Air War College, focusing on China and East Asia. Xiaoming holds a doctorate in history from the University of Iowa and is widely published with over 30 articles and several books on China, his latest being Deng Xiaoping's Long War. Dr. Michael Kraig, Associate Professor of National Security Studies at the Air Command and Staff College, focuses on the geopolitical challenges of the U.S. rebalance to Asia. Michael earned a doctorate in political science from the State University of New York. He also has numerous publications, and his latest book is U.S. Military Power for the Asia Pacific. So, gentlemen, thank you for being here today. So now, let's go to some answers. Michael, I want to start with you. How bad is this North Korea nuclear weapons threat, and is it something the United States should really be worried about?
Well, I think we should worry less about it in terms of a capable missile with a miniaturized warhead that we know works, that can strike the U.S. mainland or even Alaska. And we should actually take a page from the book of Clausewitz, who said that everything's political in the end. And I think the real threat is the fact that the long-range missile they're pursuing is a symptom of the larger problem, which is that North Korea has become a garrison state, isolated, a hermit kingdom, engaged in illicit trafficking just to stay afloat, and which constantly threatens Seoul with 8,000-piece artillery barrage at any moment. And nuclear weapons really are a symptom of their garrison mentality, where really the leader is the state is the society, and if the leader feels his legitimacy is challenged by the U.S. and by neighbors, if he feels like North Korea is in a tight place as a nation, is faltering in its basic sovereign autonomy and existence, then it may feel like it needs to lash out to defend its sovereign autonomy. And so really, to wrap it up, I think their long-range missile is a threat, but to me, it's a symptom of the larger problem and the larger threat, which is North Korean instability and isolation.
Mm-hmm. Well, Xiaoming, so following up on that, if the U.S. is supposed to be concerned about this threat, so what is most concerning to China about the North Korean nuclear weapons?
North Korea has been a major concern for the Chinese government. And there's first two things we have to consider that as a not just concern, but even perhaps as a threat. Number one, both countries do not have the same national interests. China wants regional security, prosperity. North Korea only wants the survival of its regime. And second, the two countries do not have the same ideology, like what happened during the Cold War. And talk about the recent North Korea nuclear problem, that's become even more concern about for the China. First, let's look at what China facing. That recently, the unstable North Korean situation over the nuclear problem create a lot of instability inside China. And first, for example, Northeast China depends on some kind of trade with North Korea, and that become uncertain. And number two, and North Korea always create a major regional instability. For example, U.S. response to the North Korea nuclear problem by increasing military exercise with South Korea in the region and deployment of the third anti-missile system, which Chinese see that as a threat to China itself. So for today, this North Korea nuclear problem become a major problem for Chinese government to consider how to really to turn the region into the stable region which China really can benefit not only from economic development but also from security perspective.
Well, so you mentioned the trade relationships, some of the trade relationships between the North Koreans and the Chinese. I want to sort of pick at that a little bit and ask you about the amount of influence that China has on the North Koreans, particularly if the Chinese government has the will to exercise all of their parts of influence.
Yeah, this is always the question and debates about what the Chinese influence and actually on North Korea. And actually Chinese and influence on North Korea is limited. First, let's look at that. What does North Korea want? North Korea wants security, right? That China cannot offer, because North Korea developed its nuclear program aimed at for its security or survival of the Kim Jong-un's regime. But that China cannot provide. And that only can be provided is the United States. And look at this historically. Historically, and each time when we talked about the North Korea nuclear issues, either and bilateral between United States and North Korea during Clinton time, or during the Sixth Party talk and George W. Bush time, and the latest is between and during Obama time. Each time, United States walked away from that guarantee. And then China tried to ask the China, they think that it's not China's problem. The China can mediate the problem, but China cannot give the guarantee and no leverage on that. Yes, you mentioned about trade. And what China's goal in the region on this North nuclear issue? The goal is denuclearization and peaceful settlement of this problem and no collapse of North Korea. And China does not want to do too much on the trade issue, cause the collapse of North Korea. And because that will create a lot of unanswered questions for Chinese to address. Historically, each time North Korea collapsed, which will get China involved. Each time China involved, that's very bad for China. And the latest example is 1950 Korean War. And so this is another, and China really limited their influence, and because they concern, and their concern is different from Americans' concern.
Well, it sounds like, based on your opinions, that the Chinese really don't have that much influence. I mean, and the influence they have is complicated by a lot of different factors competing within China itself. So, Michael, if we take that line of reasoning that the United States has more of a role to play in this, and if we also believe that we've heard that President Trump is known as a deal maker, does he have, is it probable that he could make a deal with the North Koreans to eliminate their nuclear weapons threat?
Well, this has three levels, really. First of all, there's what North Korea wants, which my colleague so ably described, which is absolute assurance of its coexistence with the South as a separate regime with sovereign autonomy, security, and respect for their regime's ideological or identity existence, if you will, cultural and political existence. The second level, though, is to get the South to accept, and there it's perhaps as complex as it's ever been. Not only has there been a recent corruption scandal with the PAC regime, but the polity, the society, the politics of South Korea remain incredibly polarized to this day. between the right, which identifies with the U.S. alliance and with a still very strong, vehement anti-communist ideology or identity, and then a left who's focused on a human rights agenda that puts them as much at odds with our ally Japan as with North Korea.